Thank you very much. My name is Joe McFadden. I'm a grateful alcoholic, and my sobriety date is June 14th, 1993. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And I hope that if you were my neighbor or you were part of my business nucleus, or you saw me driving in traffic or at the line at the supermarket, you would see a guy whose behavior exemplifies someone who's a grateful alcoholic. I'm a big three legacy page 19 member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll get into that today. And that's going to be pretty much the thrust of my talk after I do my qualifying, which I believe is a very important part. Um, and what time do you want me to shut it down?
Whenever you're done, sometime close to the top of the next hour, please.
Okay, very good. I will
Yeah.
close it at the top of the hour. So, when I first was asked to speak, there was a Dr. Silkworth who was not Dr. Silkworth, but another doctor who had a treatment center in Comfort, Texas, and he asked me to speak on his birthday. I had like 6 months sober, and his secretary came up. I had him rolling and laughing. And she came up to me and she goes, Joe, Joe, Joe. I said, what? She goes, you have 5 minutes left. Get sober. So when you tell a guy like me, just talk as long as you want, my mother said that I could talk for 3 days on the same subject and never have repeated myself at the end of 3 days. In the beginning of the fourth, still not said a damn thing. So I'll try to share with you my experience, strength, and hope. Alcoholics Anonymous, to me, if you ain't enjoying it, you're doing something wrong. I remember my wife. She really hates it when I share this, but I love Elizabeth, and thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth is one of my heroes in Alcoholics Anonymous, and almost every weekend I'm out of town talking this or doing AA this month, and this was my only free weekend. I've got people downstairs visiting and everything, but when Elizabeth called, I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I just love Alcoholics Anonymous. But my wife hates it when I tell this story. She's not home. She went to high tea with her sisters, so I get to tell it. You always hear people say sobriety's like sex. If you ain't enjoying it, you're doing something wrong. And let me make a statement about that. I remember the first time I had sex. I was scared, know what I was doing, and I was alone. And so the reason I share that is it's so important in Alcoholics, and I apologize. That's about as crass as I'll get tonight. But what I'd like to do is tell you that the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is I've never, ever had to be alone. I lost that sense of aloneness, that aching, that internal vacancy that nothing, and at the end, booze couldn't even feel. I lost that the minute I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, busted, disgusted, and not to be trusted, and fully surrendered. I took the negative step two the minute I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. What I pray was my last time. The negative step two is I came to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as I had been living it. And I came in here and I was ready to do whatever y'all asked me to do. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life where I have continuity of effort, sincerity of purpose, and clarity of vision. And that's what I was always looking for my whole life. And one of the most important things I found in Alcoholics Anonymous, it comes in form of this story, because there isn't anything that exemplifies it any better than this story for me. And what it was is there was this old man. He was a drunk. He was a bad drunk. And he was drinking at late night, and there was a preacher. I mean, this wasn't just a preacher. This was a televangelist. You know what a televangelist? He says 5-syllable miracle. And so he was saying, look, if you got problems, you come down Saturday night to my tent revival. Now, Saturday night at my tent revival, we're going to light it up. You bring it down, and we're going to lay hands on you, and your problems will be removed by Jesus. And the old drunk says, my God, I got to stay sober. So Saturday comes, he doesn't drink. And he's like, minute, the clock is, that internal spring is tightening up, tightening up, tightening up, tightening up. And then all of a sudden, he just can't stand it anymore. He's got 2 hours and he just can't do it. So he goes to the liquor store and does what any good self-respecting alcoholic would do. He just wanted one drink. And of course, that manifested the phenomenon of craving. The guy gets loaded. Finally, he says, oh my God, I'm going anyway. I need a miracle. I got a hell of a problem. So he goes down there just in time for them to play Just As I Am Without One Plea. And the preacher's there saying, if you got a problem, come down. So he stumbles his way down there, right down the middle of the aisle. The preacher sees him. He's the only one coming to the altar call. He grabs him. He says, son, do you have a problem? He says, yes, sir. I got one hell of a problem. He goes, do you need help from the Lord? He goes, yes, sir, I do. He goes, what's your problem? He goes, I got a problem with my hearing. And this old televangelist just puts his hand over the guy's ears and starts shaking him, spitting and spraying. The deacons get so involved in it, they go put their hands on it and they're talking in tongues. After about 15 minutes and everybody profusely sweating, they go, bam! He says, how's your hearing now, son? And he goes, I don't know. It ain't till Tuesday. You see, I've been dipped, dunked, and sprayed. I've been sent to psychologists, counselors, therapists, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts. I've done everything in the world to try to get sober, and nothing worked. They were good-hearted people. They knew about the disease, but they didn't know from experience. You know, they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, you can snow the snowman, but you can't shit the shitter. And it took a world-class room full of world-class problem solvers to come in there. What I've discovered, and if you're new here tonight, what I have discovered is, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I got some good news and I got some bad news. The good news is, regardless of what your therapist, counselor, or LCDC has told you, relapse is not part of Alcoholics Anonymous. You never, ever have to drink ever again. That's the good news. The bad news is, well, look at all the celebrity screen, all the people at this meeting. Meet your new friends. But you see, what I found out with Alcoholics Anonymous is it's not about education. It's not about information. It's about identification. And I'll get into a slew of that as I'm qualifying tonight, of where the magic ingredient of Alcoholics Anonymous is two beggars going to a table and the one beggar showing how he got the crumbs. And I found every answer I was looking for in the bottle in the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. So with that, I'd like to get started. I grew up in Kansas City. I was in the projects. My folks were all preachers or backslidden preachers, alcoholics, pimps, and prostitutes. I knew that my whole life, I never met my father. I was a product of a rape. My mother, every day of my life, hated me because I reminded her of that man. I was told every day that I was a mistake. I was told every day, every problem she ever had. Of course, she was 14 when she got pregnant with me, 15 when she had me, and I was a burden. I stuttered. I went to special education. I wasn't good at sports. I wasn't good at school. I knew one thing. I didn't want to be like my family. I didn't want to be like my uncles who were on street corners drunk, hounding out tracts, reciting verses of the Bible, and everybody looking at them, and then the police can't come and arrest them. Or with my aunt bringing home a different uncle every night. And I didn't want to be like my grandmother, living in the projects and just living for 8 o'clock in the morning for the deli to open so she could go get her medicine. I didn't know that beer wasn't medicine. I grew up thinking that. And I knew I didn't want to be like my aunts and my uncles and my cousins. I didn't want to go to prison. I didn't want to go in and out of the state hospitals. But you know what? I never made it to prison, but I did everything else. You know, there's a principle in our big book. It says, fear set in motion trains the circumstances we felt we didn't deserve, but did not we set them in motion? And what I get out of that principle is that fear is a principle. Fear is a prayer, a subconscious prayer.
Take it away.
I apologize, y'all. That kind of threw my rhythm out. But anyway, I was on fear. A bad carpenter cusses his tools. A good carpenter learns how to use them. The difference between a defect and an asset is a defect is a misuse.
How much you want to bet the phone is?
So we'll try it again. Sorry about the Wi-Fi, guys. So what I found out is that everything I ever feared in my life came upon me. So fear is a subconscious prayer for what I don't want to happen. And what I had to do is start believing in something. And my first experience was with that. Whenever I was having a bad day and I didn't want bad things to happen, and I just had this magic magnifying mind, I felt like the only hope I had was alcohol. And the only way, when I was 12 years old, I took my first drink, and then I understood why grandma and my aunts and uncles and why they all drank and why they did what they did. Because all of a sudden, I wasn't this stutterer who went to special ed, who didn't have a dad and was real poor. I wasn't any of that. I was better than, and I was good looking, and I stopped stuttering. It cured acne. It got me over my shyness, and I felt wonderful. And little did I know that that would alter the course and direction of my life forever. And I pursued that. And all of a sudden, things started really happening in my life where I no longer felt alone. The bedevilments, I didn't have any of the bedevilments. I walked around, I had hope in my life, because whenever I had any free time, anything I had to do to drink, I would do that. And I pursued that a long time until finally I had a cousin and we were running together, and I couldn't run with him that night. And he ended up getting in a shootout, and he shot and killed a police officer in Kansas City, and he went to prison. But for the grace of God, I wasn't with him that night. And I knew that I needed to not turn out that way. And so what I did is I really dedicated myself to sports. And I found out when you're picking up girls in bars, this sounds good, but in fact, there's a little truth to this. I probably, when 1975, may have went to the Olympics, but Carter boycotted it. I was a wrestler. And so I straightened up because of what happened to my cousin Eddie Ray. And I ended up getting a scholarship to college. And when I went to college, I found if they wanted to rush you and get you put into a fraternity, and that meant a lot of free booze. And I joined that, and then I ended up losing my scholarship, getting kicked out of college. And I went and I learned another trade, and I excelled in the car business. And but I drank myself out of that career. I drank myself out of everything in the world that meant anything to me. I met a girl, her dad owned the dealership. We got married, and I disgraced that family. And I ended up moving to Texas. And when I got to Texas, I met another lady, and she decided what needed to happen for me was that I needed to have children. And I walked in one day and she was standing on her head. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" She goes, "I want your seed to find fertile soil." And we had 2 kids. And I'll tell you, if I had to choose, when you hear in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, don't drink no matter what, I'm a guy that's going to drink no matter what. And I ended up losing that marriage and putting them through hell. And I ended up sleeping in cars that were abandoned. And I ended up going back to Kansas City, living on the streets there. And I ended up doing things that no human being should ever be doing. and I knew degradation, and I ended up taking 38 Xanax and drinking a gallon of Reuniti wine and slitting my wrist, and they found me and they brought me back to life, and then they took me to the ER, and at the ER they pumped my stomach and put me in ICU because you see, the drinking could no longer get me there, and I would walk around crying. There wasn't enough of women, drugs, or drinking that was going to get me where I wasn't inhabiting my body. When we talk about on page 30, pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, that was where I was at, and I couldn't drink to get out of it. And I would just start crying, and I would drink, and at my bottom, I stuck my finger down my throat and was puking and pouring more whiskey down there and still couldn't get drunk. And somebody walked in and they said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I can't get drunk. Help me, help me, help me, please." And there was no human power that could do anything for me. There wasn't a single person in all and any of my family, and I didn't have a single friend. I was living that George Thorogood song, "I drink alone because all by myself because nobody else was there." And then what the booze used to do to me, it was doing for me. It was what it used to do for me, it started doing to me. And let me describe what I looked like at that time. I weighed 370 pounds. I had been in and out. I went from treatment centers to state hospitals, and then I was admitted to the Texas State Insane Asylum. I weighed 370 pounds. I was living on SSI. I was awarded the state of Texas MHMR, ladies and gentlemen, that stands for mental health, mental retardation. I was waiting to live in Section 8 housing. I was court ordered to take 14 pills a day to sedate the intensity of my emotions. And if I didn't take the sedation medication, they would put me back in the state hospital. This time when I go to the state hospital, I wasn't going to go and saw the alcohol unit. This time I was going to the caged unit with the 12-foot caged walls outside with the concertina razor wires on top of that. And I went there, and whenever I was in the ICU at my last drunk, I woke up and I found out that I hadn't even been able to successfully commit suicide. So I ripped everything out of my throat, out of my nose, out of my veins. I took off all the EKG wires, and I went over to the window and I jumped out of the window to my death, but I was on the first floor. They put me in a straitjacket. They did a 5-point restraint. They took me to the San Antonio State Hospital. That's also the Texas State Insane Asylum. There I spent what I hope to be the last time I was ever there. I took 81 days. I had 37 shock treatments, and I wanted them more than anything. I knew that Alcoholics Anonymous didn't work because you people, this isn't what you told me, but this is absolutely what I heard. You people stopped drinking and your life got better, and you went to PTA meetings. And then after the AA meeting, you went out for ice cream and had a great time. I didn't relate to you people because when I quit drinking, that's when the shit hit the fan for me. That's when it was as though I walked around, and when I drank, I had 220-volt wires, and the drinking put coating on those wires. And as I got sober, the coating came off and they started arcing. And I could read your mind, and I could predict the future, and I could smell phonies, and I could feel rejection a year ahead of time. And that's what sobriety was for me. And I couldn't understand how you people, I had real problems. No, everyone hated me, and everyone rightfully should hate me. I busted everybody, and I broke everybody's hurt. I was like a hurricane. I was a tsunami of bad in every person's life. And anybody who tried to love me, I would hurt. And if I ever had to choose between alcohol and you would always lose. And this time I didn't even have alcohol. And I remember whenever I was in that padded room and the doctor slid open And he looked in there, and it was Dr. Colvin. And I've been in there. He says, Joe, what are we going to do? And I said, please give me more shock treatments. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work. Don't send me there. And he says, okay. So he gave me the 81 days, 37 shock treatments. And I remember sitting there, and they would strap you all down. They put wet gauze on you, and then they put the electrodes, and they would there, and your body would shake. And then afterwards, they take you up to the 3rd floor. And on that 3rd floor, they would have you lay there and kind of reacclimate. And people come and talk to you, and it'd be like Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. I couldn't understand. My mind, I couldn't make my mouth talk, and I just sit there. And out in the distance from the 3rd floor of this recoup room, I would look, and I saw this beautiful family with horses, and they had a swimming pool, and there was 2 little girls there, and they would have a good family, and then they'd go get the ponies and put the girls on the ponies and take them around, the husband and wife. I said, my God, how'd I end up here? I never wanted to be here. I never wanted to be like my grandma and my aunts and uncles. I never wanted to be in insane asylums. How did I end up here? My God. And I'd look there, and then they'd take me down. And when it got time for me to go back to group therapy, there was a lady there named Kate Holy. And she was my therapist. And she goes, Joe, you've been in and out of here before, and I've seen you in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And AA doesn't work for people like you. And she goes, I'm not going to allow you to come to therapy because people like you just learn better ways to hustle people, and you'll start finding people's insecurities here and preying on their weaknesses here. She goes, I know a man who got sober February 6, 1957. His name is Jim W. in San Antonio. And he said he'd be willing to help you if you'd like to call him. I suggest you give him a call. And I said, okay. I said, but why should I listen to you? Because, and she says, well, 17 years ago, I got kicked out of the Navy for drinking. And she goes, I'm a 16-year sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she goes, AA cannot work for you. AA cannot, will not, never has, never will, and is absolutely impossible to fail provided you take certain actions. I never saw you get a sponsor. I never saw you read the big book. I never saw you take the steps. I never saw you get a position of service at a home group. She goes, the only thing I saw you do was coming in stoned and probably still drinking your vodka, and you'd be trying to pick up the alpha girls from the alpha home. You never got serious about your recovery. AA doesn't work for you until you start working for AA. She goes, you do what you want, but I suggest you call Jim Willis. And I called him and I said, Mr. Willis, he goes, hello, Joe, I've seen you in and out before. He says, you could be a genius, but somewhere along the line, your mind is turned on you. He says, I'll take you through the 12 surrenders, but I got a condition. You got to put above all else, you got to build your life around Alcoholics Anonymous, not Alcoholics Anonymous around your life. And then everything I pass on through the 12 steps, he called them the 12 surrenders of Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything I pass on to you, you have to, and this is the only way it'll work for people like you and me, is everything that you've received from my higher power through me through the 12 steps, you have to agree to pass on to others. And that is a non-starter for me. And ladies and gentlemen, I must say that's the only thing in my life I've ever kept 1,000,000,000% my word on. And he said me something, and I'd like to share it with you because it changed my life, and the hopes is it might change yours tonight. He said, Joe, you've got 2 secrets, and there's the same 2 secrets that I had and I didn't know that I had, and there are 2 secrets I believe you have that you don't know you have. The first one is you always knew you wanted to love and be loved more than you were able to receive or give. And the other one is that you always knew you were smarter than you were ever able to display. And I said, yeah. He goes, well, that's exactly where this program begins and where you end. And he says, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to, when you get out, take a bus over to my office. And I did that. And on the way, he asked me to go over to the intergroup and pick up a big book. And I said, oh, I don't have any money. He goes, well, I know that. I didn't ask if you had money. I said, stop by the intergroup. And I walked in there, and I'd been kicked out of the AA group there in San Antonio, the Ellis Island of Alcoholics Anonymous, Club 12, bring us your wretched refuse. Here I am. And for fighting and tipping over a Coke machine and throwing a chair at an old timer. And I needed Alcoholics Anonymous this time. There was no arguing or resistance in me at all. And I walked in there, and I was praying they didn't recognize me from me showing my butt at those meetings and scaring people. And I walked in, and there was a lady, there was a purple Cadillac out front. I walked in, it smelled like lilacs. There was a lady with purple hair and purple lips. She wore purple. Her stationery was purple. She smelled like lilacs, and her name was Lilas. And I walked in, and she goes, hi, honey, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, oh my God, I died and went to hell. And she says, you must be Joey. I don't let anybody call me Joey. She goes, sit down. Mr. Willis told me you were on your way. And I sat down there, and this is where, and historians have used this line, from this shredding thread, our destiny hung. I could have turned around and walked away, but I sat there and I listened to this woman's happiness that made me want to puke with every syllable I heard. And she sat there, and then oh, excuse me, she picked up the phone. Alcoholics Anonymous, we hope you're having a wonderful day. Can I help? All this crap, my God. And then she said, she said, can I just get the big book and leave? She goes, yeah, but I wanted to talk to you. She goes, I got sober 37 years ago. And she goes, women know degradation way worse than men can. She goes, but I'm going to tell you, the thing that scared me the most, and the thing I was the most ashamed of, is I just came in from Bowie Hall, and I had 42 shock treatments. Wow. That's God. And I went over to Jim, and then he says, I want you to go to meetings. I want you to get up. And I stayed at the people of Alcoholics Anonymous houses and apartments and on their floors. And they let me stay there. He says, what I want you to do is I want you to go to a meeting. I want you to leave the women. You go to AA to save your you-know-what, not to get a ASS. And I made that very clear. That was a line I could not cross. He said, after the meeting, you go up and you shake 3 men's hands and thank them for what they shared. You straighten up all the chairs, you clean the ashtrays, and then you call me. I said, yes, sir. And he made me write it down. After the first meeting, I did as he said, because he made me write it down. Then I called him. He said, Joe, did you do what I asked? And I went through it, and I said, yes. He goes, what was the topic? And I started crying. I said, Jim, my mind doesn't work. I don't know what the topic was. He goes, do you remember what anyone said? I said, no. And he goes, do you feel different after that meeting? I said, yes. And he goes, congratulations, kid. That's the first experience you've had in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's God. And from that shredding thread, my destiny began. I finally found that there is something in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I started working assiduously the 12 steps. And I started running around with a taper in Alcoholics Anonymous named Tom McMullen, God rest his soul. And I got to meet all these famous circuit speakers, and I got to go on the road with him taping things. And I got to meet all these people, and I got to tell them, look, I'm crazy. I'm not really an alcoholic. I just, I don't have anywhere else I can go. And he goes, look, you'll do till one shows up. And by God, one showed up. And I'll tell you how it happened. Is someone said, if you're wondering if you're an alcoholic, go to chapter 4, page 44, fourth line down, and ask yourself 2 questions. If when you're drinking, do you have a hard time controlling, or if after you're drinking, can you stop completely? In other words, it's not the first drink that gets you drunk. I mean, it's not the last one, it's the first one. It's not the engine it's not the caboose that kills you, it's the first one, it's the engine. And I had to look at that. And every time I drank, I didn't get in trouble, but every time I got in trouble, I had been drinking. And I had to look at that. And then he had me look at the 4 classifications on page 108. of alcoholics, and that they described to the wives. And then they had me go from page 20 to 21, the real alcoholic, the hard drinker, and the moderate drinker. And I had to look at that, and I had to look at the similarities. And then I said, well, you know what? I think I am an alcoholic, but I never had the mental obsession. You know, we talk about from the doctor's opinion to page 23, we're talking solely about the manifestation of a phenomenon of craving. The way they explained it to me was the first half of the first step is broken down in two parts. From the doctor's opinion to page 23, we're talking about the physical allergy. And I had that. Well, the cure to that is never to put it in your body. Well, class dismissed. If that was all there is to alcoholism, every person that ever got out of a treatment center or a detox would be a winner, and we wouldn't have any need to go to meetings. But subsequently, we've got a much worse insidious part, and that is from page 23 to 43. That's the second half of the first step, the mental obsession. And I said, well, I don't have that. I just changed my mind in drinking. And he said, that's exactly what we're talking about. Page 23, top paragraph. These observations would be academic and pointless. What observation is that? Is that I take the first drink and then it takes me wherever, and I'm going to drink no matter what. It says, if the alcoholic didn't take the first drink, thereby setting this terrible cycle in motion, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. That I could buy it. And trying to manage the second half of step 2 is those 9 bedevilments in the middle paragraph of page 52. Trying to manage either one of those alone and unaided is unmanageable by me. And that's when I became a card-carrying member, hook, line, and sinker of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did my 5th step, and I told him some things that I swore I'd never tell anybody. And I looked at him and I said, Jim, I'm a monster. And he goes, no, you've done some monstrous things, but you're a precious child of God. And you know what? I believed him because he did everything that I had done, and he could match scores with me. I said, but Jim, what you don't understand is I have dual diagnosis. And I said, I've had psychiatrists, therapists, people with initials behind their name. I have dual diagnosis. He goes, well, you've got 3 months sober now, and it's time for you to get off. And I'm not telling anybody here to get off your medication. I am sharing this person that is speaking tonight's experience. So please don't come up to me and tell anyone I told you this. This is my experience. He worked with my psychiatrist, and at 4 months sober, about 4.5 months sober, I was off everything. And he says, I concur, you do have a dual diagnosis. And it tells you what it is on page 62. You're selfish and self-centered. He goes, for $145, you can go there and you can talk about your issues. But what we're going to talk about is your defects of character for $1 a meeting. You see, when you're in therapy, because I'm a guy who loves to talk in therapy and talk about me and my problems. But the minute I get into therapy is when this happens, is when selfish, on page 62 and 103, it says selfish, our troubles are of our own making. We're extreme examples of self-will and right, although we usually do not think so. We got a hell of a life if you fit in there. Where we don't have any solution for you and you stop being an alcoholic is when you say, my sponsor tells me, is that when your troubles are of other people's making, they're extreme examples of self-will and right, although they usually do not think so. We haven't got a solution for you. But you get to be a victim, and you don't have to be accountable because everybody else's fault. But you're always going to be alone. And so what I had to do is I had to start working on that. And after that, he wanted me to get a job. I'm getting like $450 a month. I'm on the gravy train. I've got the promises of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get a check for the government for being crazy. You want me to give that up and work? What the hell I got the wrong sponsor. And he says, yeah, we have a 7th tradition. And you're going to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Look, I can't drink. I'm off all medication. And now you want me to get a job and give up my retirement income? He goes, it's not retirement income. You feign crazy. You're living life based on a spiritual principles, and you're going to get a job. I said, I feel like crap. I cry all the time. Everybody hates me. He goes, if you feel like crap, get a crappy job. The reason everybody hates you is because they don't trust you because you're scary. How if you don't have any self-esteem, we're going to start teaching you to do esteemable things. So I had to go out there and be a greeter at the Ellis Island of Alcoholics Anonymous, where they kicked me out. I had to go there and beg the board to let me in. I didn't, and the thing is all the guys he sponsored, I said, oh yeah, they call him his sponsor, and he calls them his sponsees, but they're really just a bunch of ass kissers. I had to go make amends to every one of those guys, and I had to be one of those. And I said, oh, I don't like them. They talk about me. Club 12 is just one big clique. And he goes, the only thing clicking around here is your mind. He goes, it becomes a fellowship once you become part of it. So I went in there and I became a part of it, and I became a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I greeted people. I said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Then all of a sudden, something changed, and they invited me to go out afterwards. And then something changed, and there was a lady there named Judy, and this is my Judy moment, and I want to share it with you. It's the greatest moment in my life. Judy came in and I met her, and she was a pretty gal, and she had her 2 kids taken away from her, and she just cried all the time. My kids didn't want to have anything to do with me. They were ashamed of me. They didn't even want me coming to their softball games. And I was so busted about that, and they didn't want to have anything to do with me. And their mother had remarried a guy who's in Book of Who's Who, and they said, oh yeah, he's crazy. Just you're better off. And they were. Little by little, all that changed. But Judy, I sat there, and I'd make sure the predators wouldn't be flirting with her or anything. And I'd give her coffee and Kleenex. We go to meetings, and I knew she's going to commit suicide. I was on the verge so many times early in sobriety of committing suicide. One day, Judy didn't show up when she had 90 days sober. And then she came, and she goes, and I said, where you been? She goes, I went to court, and they said if I stay sober 90 days, more, that they're going to let me have my kids back. And I said, oh, wonderful, wonderful. 2 weeks go by. She's at meetings every day. The beginning of the 15th day, she's nowhere around. I look all around, and she's not there. I ask everybody, hey, has anybody seen Judy? Nobody's seen Judy. I call my sponsor. I said, don't you guys keep a row attendance or anything? He says, I don't know who the hell you're talking about. Second day, I'm looking at the obituaries, calling the hospitals. Third day, I'm driving around looking in alleys, looking on the streets for the working girls. I know Judy. The 4th day, she comes in, and I'm just beside myself. I run up, I give her a big hug. I lift her, I kiss her on both cheeks, and said, Judy, how are you? She goes, Joey, you ain't gonna believe this. They let me have the kids back. They're at the babysitter now. I get to go to a meeting. This stuff works. And I start crying. And I call Jim, my sponsor, and I say, Jim. He says, what? I said, Judy got her kids back. He goes, oh, shit. I go, what do you mean, oh, shit? Didn't you hear? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm not saying all shit for me. For 3 days, I haven't heard one sorry, sick, neurotic complain about your problems. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, that is Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you what happened once I bought the package is I believe my sponsor believed in me, and I went there and I knew, he says, you know the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know how to treat a newcomer. The guiding principle of Alcoholics Anonymous is the antithesis of the selfishness and self-centered getting without giving. On page 128, the guiding principle of Alcoholics Anonymous is giving rather than getting becomes the guiding principle. There's only one acceptable answer to an AA request, and that is yes. What I started doing is practicing these principles and treating every person like in my business, like I was going on a 12-step call, trying to help God's kids get what God's kids want. And all of a sudden, I was speaking at a treatment center. Somebody came up and asked me if I'd sponsor them. And then he knew somebody and they heard about me. And then all of a sudden, I got a job that I knew nothing about. And what I started doing was just my job. I was working for this billionaire. He'd walk by and say, hey, Joe, come in here. Tell these SOBs what your job is. Yes, sir. I plagiarized page 63. Every morning, from the time my feet hit the floor in the morning, when I was in the state hospital getting up at 5:30 in the morning, big black guy come on and say, "Feet on the floor, mother." And I say, from the time my feet hit the floor in the morning till the time I lay down at night, I got one job: to make my new employer look good. And he say, "This guy's gonna make it. We need more people like him." And I went rapidly, just practicing the AA principles that I learned how to do, emptying ashtrays with all of these people. And I went up all the way up on this company. And I had these ideas that were outside of the box. And I ended up taking that, and I left that company with this idea, and I went with my sponsor and I pitched it. Then I went over at Congress and I pitched it. I hired some think tank people. I got something changed into law, and that changed the dynamics of my life. And then all of a sudden, it says, if you persist, all sorts of remarkable things will happen. When we look back, the temporal light is 2020, but the spiritual light is when we look back, it's only understood in hindsight. I didn't know. All I was doing was trying to help God's kids the way my sponsor told me to. And what happened was, as I just got beyond my wildest dreams. I met a lady and fell in love, and she believed in me. She made me feel like a man, but more importantly, she's an Al-Anon. She made me feel like I was her man. And I am Alcoholics Anonymous, man. Every good thing in my life came as a result of this program. And what happened was one day there was a reporter who wanted to do an interview with me. And I became an elected official. How you like that? And we went to this big ranch party where these are like some of the corporate icons of America. They have Chief Justice of the United States there, and I'm walking in there, and she's going to interview me, and she's going to sit with me during this party, and I'm there. She's doing the interview, and then we go in, and the person's whose ranch we're going into, I walk up, and you have to shake his hand before you come in, and everything. And he says, "You look familiar." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "My picture's in every post office in America." And he starts laughing. He says, "No, you look familiar." He goes, "Frank Jones." Now, Frank Jones was the chairman of the Pacific Group, and he was in an Academy Award-winning movie and stuff, and he and I were really close friends. And he asked me when he died, his wife Peggy asked me said Frank wanted you to do his eulogy. And I did his eulogy. And Frank was a war hero, and this guy was in the Vietnam War, and said, "I owe my life to Frank, and I was there when you did his eulogy. Would you sit at the head table with me?" And I said, "Sure." And it's amazing. How do you get from where I was to there? And all I did was try to help God's kids, practicing what you people told me how to treat a newcomer. And it serves spiritual principles, and those spiritual principles you can't outgive will serve you well. You can't outgive God. I got 6 minutes and I'll wrap it up. So I come over there and I sit, and I'm sitting next to this man and this woman and their 2 daughters. And I'm sitting there, and the night is going on. I'm talking to this reporter, then I'm talking. This guy's a senator, and he asked me, we start talking, and then he asked me for my phone number. I give him my phone number, and I said, "Well, it's probably going to want to, a donation or something like that." And so anyway, we started talking, and then we said, "Well, I said, well, where do you?" And I described his house to him. He goes, "How do you know about my house?" I said, "Oh, I had to cover my butt." And I said, "Oh, I was looking to buy a house in that neighborhood. It's really beautiful." And he goes, "Oh, okay." So that night wraps up, and as I'm driving 11 miles to get off from the ranch to the asphalt, I pull over and I started crying. And when I finally got to the asphalt a few miles out, I pulled over in tears, and I called my sponsor. He says, "What's up, Joe?" And I told him. And he says, "Well, what's the significance of that?" And I said, "The man I was sitting next to, the senator with the 2 girls and his wife that I was talking to and spent the evening with, is the man that I looked down from the 3rd floor when I was getting the shock treatments and at that house. That was him." Now, how in the world do you get from the state hospital being busted, disgusted, not to be trusted, to being there? And that's called the grace of God. You see, Bill Wilson, no one had ever heard of the word slip when he was doing the meetings out on Clinton Street. And the guy that came up with the name Alcoholics Anonymous was Joe. He started the New Yorker magazine, and he died of alcoholic wet brain in St. Elizabeth's Hospital. And he didn't show up to the meeting 3 weeks in a row. And someone asked Bill what happened to Joe, what happened to be his name. And he said he slipped, and no one had ever heard what that meant. Said, what do you mean he slipped? He said he slipped from the grace of God. And you see what I believe each and every one of us do when we attend meetings like that and we say yes to an AA request, is every time we do that, we're putting ourselves in a position to continually receive that grace of God. And with the 3 minutes I have left, I'd like to share this story. Is when I came in, I didn't know that my world had shattered. I thought that I had shattered. And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, they told me to take the 12 steps. And I thought we had to work on the problem. They said, no, we got to work on you. And it reminded me of the second speaker I ever heard in my life told a story. And I'd like to close with this. Is that this man was really on the ropes at work. And so what he did is he came home, and his son was there and wanted to teach him how to throw a curveball, so that he, in the little league finals this weekend, he would be able to win it by throwing his new curveball his daddy had been helping him perfect. But he hadn't quite got there. And daddy came home Thursday, said, all right, I'll teach you tonight and all day Friday. But then the dad had the meeting Thursday, and they changed the schematics. He had to go home and do and he couldn't do it. And the son said, you can't teach me. He goes, I'm sorry, son, I'll get fired if I don't finish this. I have to do this. The son was heartbroken, but he understood daddy needed a job. So he goes in there, and father, feeling bad, said, well, this will take me about 3 hours. So he sees a newspaper, and on the newspaper, he sees a picture of a travel agency that has this big globe on it. So he tears that world all in part and shreds it. And then he hands him all that newspaper of that world that's broken and torn up and shredded. And he gives him some Scotch tape and says, I'll tell you what, son, as soon as you get this all put together and taped together, I will go out there and I will teach it to you. Thinking it'd take him the curveball, thinking it'd take him, like two hours or so. 15 minutes later, come back, and the little boy says, Daddy says, I told you, leave me alone until it's done. He says, Daddy, look. And the dad looked at it in total amazement. He goes, oh my God, how did you do that? How did you put that world together? And he goes, well, Daddy, you handed me a world that was torn apart and shredded. But what you didn't realize was on the back of it was a picture of a man. And it was easy because I put the man together and the world came together. And I'd like to thank you and each and every one of you in Alcoholics Anonymous for putting this man's world together. Thank you.